Hello, my name is Jaru. Today we're talking about shipping! Everyone loves to ship characters with each other, and if you don't like shipping and instead like to call shipping cringe, then, well, you're a jerk. Come on, man. Don't be rude just because you're anonymous online. You could be building meaningful relationships that will keep that holiday depression at bay, and yet here you are making people feel bad. Just be a little kinder, okay? It's not hard, and it'll make your life better. What was I talking about? Oh, right, shipping. Today I'm going to be ranking the top 60, that's right, 60 Deltarune ships in a tier list. I got these ships from the Shipping Wiki, which is a thing that exists apparently, and also from Twitter. I'll be ranking the ships in the following tiers. At the top is OTP, which is the category for ships that I find immensely engaging or entertaining. Next is the Great tier, for ships that make me feel all warm and bubbly inside. Then there's the Decent tier, for ships that are vaguely pleasant. I don't find these ships particularly engaging, but they'd be an okay addition to the game. Then there's Neutral, which is exactly what you'd think. And then there's Bleh tier, which is the opposite of the Decent tier. These ships are vaguely unpleasant. And lastly is the Stomach Pain tier, which is for ships that actually make me ill to think about. With all that explained, if you enjoy this video, consider supporting me on Patreon, which is linked down in the description. We've got a lot of ships to get through, so let's get started. First up is this Addisons Polycule, or something or another. I don't quite know how it's pronounced. This is basically, what if all the Addisons were shipped with each other in one big happy relationship thing, circle, square. Anyway, this is a really good ship to start with because I feel absolutely nothing about this ship. I don't really care about the Addisons all that much, if I'm being honest. Interesting one to start with for people. Next up, though, is a ship that I have a little bit more to talk about because it has Spamton in it. And this is specifically the pink Addison shipped with Spamton. Don't ask me how people found enough grounds to ship an Addison with anyone, but apparently they did, and there's a lot of fan art of it. I'm gonna have to put that one in neutral as well. Like, I think it's a little bit better than Polycule. Like, I feel something because it has Spamton in it, but it's not enough to get into the decent tier. I don't have much of an opinion on pink Addison. But finally, we get to a ship that I actually have anything to say about, and that's Asgore with Alphys. This is a classic one because it's a holdover from Undertale, as Alphys rather infamously, or actually not infamously, Alphys rather not infamously, it's actually kind of subtle apparently, has a crush on Asgore in Undertale. Apparently, people aren't aware of this fact to the point that people have called me anti-LGBT because I implied that Alphys once had a crush on a man. I know, I'm a monster, but it's canon, so Toby Fox is the monster, not me. Point is, this is a thing from Undertale, and now we've got it in Deltarune as well. And my thoughts on Asgore with Alphys is that it goes right into stomach pain territory. Yeah, this one is absolute bottom tier. Now, I should clarify, I'm not saying that the ship wouldn't be fun to watch. I think it would make for some great drama, but it would absolutely go horribly for the characters. Alphys puts Asgore way too much on a pedestal. Like, she absolutely, like, he's a hero to her. And that may make her crush on him, but she does not understand what she's getting into. Asgore has baggage. He has baggage in spades. And it is not something I think Alphys is prepared for. Toriel was barely able to cope with it. And then, she couldn't cope with that much baggage. That's why they're divorced. And unfortunately, both of these characters have a long history of depression and thinking dark thoughts. Let's put it that way. I don't want to be demonetized, but it's the thing Alphys is thinking about doing in this scene right here. And in fact, one of the neutral endings in Undertale, this is a little known fact. I didn't know about it either, but if you do the neutral route, enough times or in the right way, Flowey will actually promise not to kill Asgore. And if you then complete the neutral route again, he will actually keep his promise. But instead, Asgore will actually off himself, which is really sad, but it demonstrates the point that I'm getting at, which is that both of these characters are not historically very happy or healthy people in the mental health department. And while sometimes being in a romantic relationship with someone who you actually have that in common with can work out, I do not think it would work out for Asgore and Alphys. I think Asgore's problems would start to shine, and Alphys would have Alphys would have no idea how to deal with it, and then she would hate herself for failing to live up to what Asgore needs. So I think that this is an inherently self-destructive ship that would just not go well for either parties. I think Alphys and Asgore are a good influence on each other as friends, but outside of that, I think romantic endeavors between them would only end in tragedy. So yeah, that's why it goes in stomach pain, because it might make for some good content to watch unfold on screen, but it would be a very sad story in the end. By contrast, we have the canonical ship from Undertale, Alphys with Undyne. But keep in mind, this is the Deltarune equivalents of these characters. So while we can use Undertale to get some, a little deeper insight into the characters, this is specifically the pairings from the Deltarune universe. So this is not canon this ship is not canon in the Deltarune reality. Not yet, anyway. And as for how I feel about it, I'd put Alphys and Undyne in the decent category. Specifically the Deltarune version. If this is the Undertale version, I might bump it up a little higher, purely because I know how important it is to people. But for the Deltarune version, I think it would be fine. If this ship came to pass, it would be nice for the sake of the people who love the Undertale version. They'll get to see more of what is probably their favorite ship. And, it would be cute. It would be nice. This ship was always at least a little bit fun to watch. And I think it would work out well here. I don't adore the pairing. I don't think it's the most intriguing thing ever. But it's fine. I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. The little bit that we've had hinted at in Deltarune Chapter 2 with Alphys and the candy and all that stuff, that's cute. I think it's a fine little ship. And unlike Alphys and Asgore, the psychology of Undyne is much better equipped to cope with the mentality of Alphys. I think Alphys's down-to-earth cleverness and generally more cautious personality is better equipped to complement Undyne's outgoing, somewhat unhinged. Okay, maybe not unhinged, but Undyne's a wild card, and I think Alphys does a great job of tying her to the ground while also while Undyne helps keep Alphys's spirits up. So I think that this is actually a really healthy pairing in general, but I'm not in love with it. I just think it's decent. Next is Temmie with the annoying dog. I was really surprised to see this one on the wiki. And I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the bleh tier. Not because I'm inherently opposed to it happening. Like, if Toby Fox chose to go this route, or if Toby Fox and Temmie Chang in real life were actually a couple, then it would probably be kind of cute. But because these are avatars of real life people, it's a little squick. It's a little uncomfortable to ship them. It's one thing to do it with fictional characters. Doing it with real people, a little weird, a little uncomfortable. And since these are avatars of real people, I don't fully feel comfortable shipping them together. But again, it's kind of like I said with, like, just because a ship is ranked low doesn't mean I wouldn't like it happening if it did happen in the game, but I can't really actively enjoy it before it becomes canon. Until it's canon, it's just fanon, and in the realm of fanon, I find this ship a little uncomfortable. So it'll go in bleh here. It's not awful, but it's just a little weird. It's just a little off for me. Speaking of, next we have Asgore and Toriel. Oh dear. This one is interesting because they are a canon couple who have been divorced in every timeline. And I'm not a relationship expert. I can't really quite pin down what it is that always causes their relationships to fall apart. And, like, no matter what reality you're in, Undyne and Toriel and Asgore always fall apart. And I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, I know why. Asgore makes mistakes, he gets over emotional, and then he does bad things. And, like, he's a good guy at heart, but whenever his emotions cloud his judgment, he can end up hurting people. And, Toriel, on the other hand, even when she's upset about things, she never lets that get in the way of doing what's right. And I think that's the issue, is that at heart they're both good people, but Asgore really doesn't have a good way of... He doesn't cope well with extreme emotions. Not necessarily doesn't cope well. He's like, he's generally a very good, wise man, but he just doesn't quite live up to the level of maturity that Toriel requires in her partners, which I think is the main issue. I guess the point I'm getting at is the reason I care about why their relationship fell apart is because it's hard to tell what would make for a good ship for Asgore, since I'm not entirely sure what he needs in a relationship. But as for the idea, I guess as far as I'm ranking this is concerned, I'll rank it based off of the idea of how much do I want to see them get back together. And if they did get back together, would I enjoy that? I'm going to say no, actually. I'm going to put Asgore and Toriel in bleh, because I think a lot of what makes Asgore so interesting comes from his personal failings as a character, and it has larger consequences in the realm of Undertale, but it's still, it's always been important for depicting him and his relationships. And I think if you took that away, if they were just like, all right, we're back together, let's go date, la la la, I think it would actually detract from his character. It's kind of like how in The Simpsons, how the Millhouses get divorced, and it's like people liked that because it was a shift in the status quo. It made the characters more interesting because at least they had something more going on. But then when the Millhouses got back together, people were kind of annoyed because it was like, okay, well, you took away one of the few interesting things about them. And I guess I kind of feel similarly about Asgore and Toriel, is that I think there are better ships for Toriel, and I think these two specifically, well, I'm not entirely sure who Asgore should end up with. I definitely don't think it should be Toriel, because I think their divorce is a big part of what makes him interesting. So yeah, I'll put it in bleh. It wouldn't be the end of the world. It doesn't upset me to think of them together because they were together canonically. It's not like stomach pain level where I'm like, I can only see tragedy in their future. Rather, this is just one where it's like, it didn't work out, and I think it's best if they find new people. Speaking of Asgore finding new people, though, here is Asgore with Rudy. Fun fact, this was one of the most popular ships that I've seen on Twitter in terms of like replies to it. I guess the question is, how do I feel about it? Well, part of the problem is that Rudy is married. So, he's kind of taken. And this is true in both timelines. In both realities, Rudy is married to someone else. So, in both Undertale and Deltarune. So, these two never got together. But I guess you could argue that maybe because Asgore always had Toriel and Rudy always had his wife, that they never had the shot to get together. I'm not sure where I'd feel on this one. I think neutral is about where I feel on it. I don't adore it. I don't hate it. I like their friendship, for sure. I can see why people would maybe like that dynamic, but I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like Alphys and Asgore in that I think the levity and cheerfulness that Rudy provides helps ground Asgore. And, well, what's ironic is, like, I think actually it's less like Alphys and Asgore and more like Undyne and Alphys, in that I think Rudy as a friend helps alleviate Asgore during his darker times, just as Undyne does for Alphys. And in fact, I'd reckon that part of why Asgore is in such poor shape in Undertale is because Rudy is already dead. Or is probably already dead. The timeline's a little unclear when Rudy dies, but point is, he does die, and it's understandable that would, deplete some of Asgore's remaining mental health. Point is, I'm not sure Rudy would be good for Asgore in a romantic setting. But the issue is, I just don't know enough about Rudy. Rudy is such an enigma character-wise. Like, we know he's a funny man, he's a nice guy, he's a good dad, he wants to take care of his family. Like, he's a decent fellow, but I don't know enough about his shortcomings. I don't know enough about his flaws as a person. Like, I know everything about why, like, what makes Alphys and Undyne strong and what makes them weak. But I don't really know anything of the sort about Rudy. So it's hard for me to get super invested in, to really imagine what their dynamic would be like. So I'm going to put it in neutral. I'll put it above these guys because I don't care about the Addisons, but I will say it's a decent, it has potential. I'm not invested in it yet. I'm neutral, but as I learn more about Rudy, I'll get more potentially interested in this ship. Or I might go, oh man, they would be just another Alphys and Asgore situation, in which case I'll dislike the ship. But for now, I'm just kind of neutral. Speaking of Addison ships, we have the blue and pink Addison ship together specifically. I'm just going to lob that one right into neutral. I think it's slightly less interesting than the multiple, because that's kind of unique on this tier list. There's not any other 4 people shipped together ships, whereas this is... But it's like 4 people I don't care about versus 2. It's like I care about this, I guess, slightly less, but I don't care either way. Next is Catty and Bratty. I'd put that in decent, actually, funny enough. And you know what? Something I almost forgot to say about Alphys and Undyne, and I'll say now as I put Bratty and Catty above Alphys and Undyne, is that part of why I don't rank Alphys and Undyne higher in Deltarune is because I'd actually like to see these characters date other people. Because I like Alphys a lot, I like Undyne a lot, and while as a couple they're fine, I'd kind of like this is an alternate reality. This is another timeline where we could potentially see new facets to their characters, and I think that would be best accomplished by having them date new people. And, it would be cool if they ended up together, but I think there's some interesting avenues for exploring their dynamics and who they are as people with new people, if you get what I'm saying. So while I'm cool with it, if it does happen, people like it, I would also like to see them date others. By contrast, I think Catty and Bratty, everything they've got going on in Deltarune is really funny. I find it really entertaining that, in Undertale, they're already best friends, and whereas in Deltarune they hate each other, but they hate each other in a very rom-com kind of way, where they think they're trying to steal each other's shtick, but in reality that's just the kind of people they are, and they're just actually really similar. And I think it's really funny. I think if they ended up together, it'd be like a rom-com. It'd be like an episode of Friends or something. And if that was the ultimate conclusion of their dynamic at the end of Deltarune, I would not be opposed. I'd find that kind of funny. So yeah, I'll put that in decent tier. Not bad. Next, we have Asriel and Des, aka December, aka Noelle's older sister, who we've yet to meet. And who we don't even have a sprite for, hence why her guitar is being used. I should clarify, I'm using the little baby Asriel sprite because that's the only Asriel sprite we have. But this is the Deltarune version of Asriel, so he'd be like young adult or teenage in terms of his actual age. Same thing with December. They're both the older siblings of Kris and Noelle. So how do I ship them? Well, Asriel is barely, the only thing we know about Asriel is the little bits we've heard people tell about him, as well as our knowledge of him from Undertale. But even in Undertale, Asriel was a little bit of a blank slate. Flowey kind of carried Asriel. Flowey had a very well fleshed out personality and character arc, whereas Asriel barely exists in the lore. And December exists even less. So, although I do have a theory on Des that I'm working on, we'll get to that in a little bit. I'll show that. I'll go ahead and put the tweet I made on screen. I'll let the YouTube comment section lose their minds as well as Twitter regarding what the heck I'm talking about there. But point is, we don't know much about December. We don't know much about Asriel. How do I feel about them as a couple? I don't. I don't feel much of anything about them. I actually I almost want to put this in bleh. But no, I'm not going to put it in bleh. I'm going to put it at the bottom of neutral because it's a little too normie. It's a little too boring. Because it's like, oh yeah, the cool older brother and the cool older sister date. It's like, Asriel was already suffering from being too generic, and everything that the fandom thinks Des is comes across as a little too generic. Like, it just comes across as nice, sweet boy, dates somewhat tough, cool girl. But not even to the extreme of, like, Susie and Noelle. It's like a much more dull version of that. And it's just too generic. I don't find it very entertaining. But, of course, that's using what little knowledge we have of these characters. Once they're further developed, I might love it. But for now, it feels a little kind of boring. So that's at the bottom half of neutral. Next, we have a weird one. It's the Diamond King and Rouxls Kaard. I'm just confused, if I'm being honest. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'm just confused. Because, like, the Diamond King doesn't exist. He has, like, 5 lines of dialogue. He might not even have 5. It's like, he's barely a character. I'll put it above Asriel and Des because, at least this is somewhat unique. But, I guess I'll put it above the Addison. No, I don't think I will. Like, I feel nothing about the Addisons, but I feel confused by this. And I think confused me is more of a negative feeling than a positive feeling. So I'm going to put it a little bit below the other Addison ships. This one's a little weird. Rouxls is shipped with a lot of characters, as you'll soon see, but this dynamic doesn't interest me all that much, I'm going to be honest. It's a little odd. Maybe there's some fan version of the Diamond King that's, like, super interesting and it, like, ships with Rouxls really well. Or, if we're being honest, there's like a fan artist out there who made some really epic art of Rouxls and the Diamond King, and now it's infatuated the fandom, because that is how a lot of the ships that are ever born are born, is because someone makes some really cute art and you go, dang, that actually looks fun. So yeah, that's where that goes. Oh, here's a fun one. Next, this is our first Toriel ship that isn't with Asgore, and it's Toriel with QC. QC, for those who don't know, she was the owner of the shop in Shodan. She was the owner of the shop in Snowden in Undertale, and she's the owner of QC's Diner in Deltarune. We know this because in the files, her sprite is actually labeled QC. So she's a sweet character, and she's very much a nice, motherly, kind-hearted figure. Kind of like but in a kind of world, not world weary, but like worldly. She feels like she's been around the block a few times, and she knows what life has in store. And Toriel's just the most, like, an extreme version of that. Like, we don't know the monsters live for the boss monsters live for thousands of years in Deltarune, but Toriel still has the same personality as Undertale Toriel, and Undertale Toriel was the extremist version of the, like, worldly mother figure. So, like, I can see why these two are shipped together. They're both, like, kind, sweet, motherly figures. Yeah, that's kind of cute. I kind of like that. It's unique. It's not something I had ever thought of before I made this tier list. Yeah, I'll put that above Alphys and Undyne, actually. I think it's a unique sort of pairing, and I think they'd get along well. At the very least, they'd be good friends. I don't know how well they work romantically. Like we said, we don't know much about QC's personality in terms of her negatives. But I like it. I think it's cute. Do I like it more than Bratty and Catty? I'll say it's a little bit below Bratty and Catty, because Bratty and Catty have a lot more going on, whereas this is like kind of a bit like, it's like, it does look a little cute now that's been shown to me, but there's not much going on there. These characters have never even spoken to each other or spoken about each other, whereas Bratty and Catty have a whole thing going on. So I'm gonna put this right here. I think it's decent. It's kind of cute. Next, we have the funniest ship on this entire tier list, and I'll pull it up here for a second. It's Jevil with Marx from Kirby and Dimentio from Paper Mario. Now, you might be thinking, Jaru, I thought these were Deltarune ships. Why are there these characters who aren't even from Deltarune in this shipping list? And that's a good question. Ask the shipping wiki, and I'll get back to you on that. This is the only ship in this tier list and on the wiki that I've seen that uses any characters who are from Deltarune. And on the one hand, it's a little annoying, but on the other hand, it's kind of on brand for Jevil to have not only one of the only polyamorous relationships in this tier list, but for him to have one with characters who aren't even in his game and are also agents of chaos. So that's just kind of hilarious. So overall, I'll throw that up into decent tier. I'll put it at like the bottom because it's kind of a meme, if I'm being honest. I'm not entirely sure why this is even included on the wiki, but why not? I think it's a cute joke, a cute little meme. It's pretty funny. Next up is an actual Spamton, or not Spamton, Jevil ship, which is Sans and Jevil. Well, aside from making me realize how short Sans is, like, dang, he's shorter than Jevil, the main thing that this ship kind of makes me think about is, like, yeah, I guess they're both jokesters. They're both, I guess they both cope with the theme of not caring, or the theme of concluding that nothing matters, that nothing you do matters. Like, they both confront that theme at one point or another in in their stories, but like I don't really feel anything for this. I mean, I can see some people liking it, I guess, but yeah, this ship doesn't really make me feel anything. There's very little overlap between them, so yeah. This one's kind of neutral. I guess I'll put it like here, in that it's like I feel like this is the most neutral I've ever felt about a ship. This one's kind of whatever. So yeah, right in the smack dab of neutral. Next up is Task Manager and Jevil. And this one's kind of funny. I mean, it's the opposites attract kind of mentality. And unlike most of these ships, these characters actually have dialogue about each other, or at the very least, Task Manager has dialogue about Jevil. Namely, she doesn't like him very much. But that in and of itself could be entertaining to see in a relationship. They're complete opposites, and tall woman who's all about order interacting with short clown man who's all about chaos. It's kind of a charming little relationship dynamic. I could absolutely, if this happened in game, I could see myself enjoying it. So I'll put that in decent here. I think it's not bad. I think it's definitely better than the meme. I probably like it more than Alphys and Undyne. And I think I'll put it right about here. Like, I don't feel as much about this. Like, I don't think, oh my gosh, that's so cute, the same way I do about Toriel and QC. But I do like it. I think conceptually there's something fun there. Next is Jockington and Ralsei. I don't know what to make of this. I mean, they're both pure-hearted, I guess, but Jockington's kind of got bricks for brains, whereas Ralsei's actually kind of clever. I don't know. This one's kind of random. This feels like there's a lot of, I don't know how many of the ships on this list are going to feel like randomly generated ships, but this feels like a randomly generated ship. I'm not entirely sure why these characters would be shipped together. So yeah, I guess I'm just sort of confused. Like, I think it's probably a worse version of the Rouxls carded Diamond King relationship, because, like, at least these characters know each other, or at least work in the same area as each other, whereas there's no reason to think Ralsei and Jockington have anything to do with one another. So, yeah, that's a bit odd. It's not as, like, I won't put it quite, it's not quite as, like generic as Asriel and Des, but it's kind of nothing. It's a kind of nothing ship for me. Next is Asgore and Gaster. I can understand this being a holdover ship from Undertale, since, you know, I guess people ship them in that. But Gaster's barely a character. So that means that any ship between him and anyone is going to be kind of weird. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the dynamic of, like, at least I can appreciate the Undertale dynamic of Asgore and Gaster, since he's basically what Alphys was before she arrived. So, and obviously she's shipped with Asgore as well. But the difference is that, like, this is Deltarune. We don't even know Gaster exists in Deltarune, technically. So, much less that he has any dynamic with Asgore. So, it's like, it's also a nothing. Like, at least we know Jockington exists. We don't know Gaster exists. So, yeah, that's another nothing. Like, it's one that could develop over time as Gaster becomes more of a character, but for now, I think it's kind of whatever. Next, and this is a weirdly popular one, is the king, or the king of spades, or the spade king, and Rouxls Kaard. I mean, I get it. I get the premise in that, I mean, they're both, I mean, I guess the main gist of it, the main thrust of the reason people ship them is because they're both Lancer's dads. So, like, you could extend that to be they're in a relationship. So, I guess I can kind of see that. But Rouxls turns on the king so quickly, and, like, he feels like an annoying interloper whenever him and Queen and Spade King talk at the end of chapter 2. So it's like, I feel like the Spade King feels like neutral or apathetic towards Rouxls Kaard, and then the Rouxls Kaard is happy to betray Spade King to work for a more successful villain. So I feel like their relationship is professional leaning on negative. So I'm not entirely sure what the appeal of their dynamic would be. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of... Yeah, I think that's a bleh. It's better than any of these. I'll give it that much. Like, I could if these characters were better fleshed out, I might like it, but as it stands, it's a little too weak and a little too nonsensical for me. Like, it's not as like awkward as Temmie and Annoying Dog, and it's not as actively detrimental to the characters as Asgore and Toriel, but it is. But I definitely dislike it more than Asriel and Des. Asriel and Des is boring. This just doesn't make sense in my mind. So yeah, I'm gonna put that there. Next up is an interesting one, a little bit more interesting. It's Asgore and King. What's funny is the king is, in many ways, a Flanderized version of Asgore, in that Asgore was a good guy and a good king who, due to trauma and tragedy, ended up doing evil things. And that's literally the Spade King story. But Spade King is more, like, plays the story more straight, in that there's no regret with him. Like, he is overwhelmingly happy to murder Kris. So there's a lot more malice with the Spade King. So it's an interesting relationship dynamic. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's one of those dynamics where it's like, I'm not sure how much I want them to date, but I would love to see them interact, just to see what kind of, like, what do you get when you get a good king corrupted by tragedy, but who feels no happiness in his dark path, interact with a more malicious version of himself. It's like, would they find relation in each other? Like, would they empathize, or would they hate each other? Like, would King see Asgore as a weaker version of himself, while would Asgore see King as a more evil version of himself? Like, would they hate each other, or would they have common ground? I'm not sure. It would be interesting. So I'm going to actually throw this up into decent tier. I'm not going to put it as high as Undyne and Alphys, because obviously this is a extremely hypothetical, potentially bad dynamic. But I think it's interesting enough to at least get above the meme. So, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Next, we have King and Queen. This one's kind of funny because there's some people say that these two have big divorced energy, and it kind of feels that way. And Toby Fox kind of plays with that idea a little, but they don't really have anything explained. Like, it almost feels like Toby Fox is memeing on the idea of them being in a relationship. With, like, her saying, you know, Lancer's my son, and King's like, as of when? Like, it almost feels like the implication is that they know each other, and they're, like, co-workers, but they're not actually in a relationship, I don't think, or they haven't been for a long time, not since Spade King got a son. So, I don't know. And honestly, if I'm being frank, I don't really see much of a dynamic between these two. Like, even in their interactions with each other at the end of chapter 2, it feels very stilted. Very, like, it doesn't feel like they have anything in common. She's a robot. And he's this big, like, lumpy, dude. Like, he's just a guy. So, a bitter, angry old man, whereas she's this, like, high-tech robot who's hip with the times. And they don't even feel like they're from the same genre, much less that they'd be in a relationship. And while I could see that making their relationship interesting, if done in a certain way, like having this like old school king in a relationship with a more high-tech modern idea of a queen, like there's some potential for something interesting there, but I don't feel it in this particular depiction of that dynamic. So I'm gonna put it at the bottom of neutral. I don't really like it, but I wouldn't say it's nonsensical in the way that Rouxls' Kaard is with Spade King, because they do have a relationship. They do have a prior history, and it's not explicitly or exclusively antagonistic the way Rouxls' Kaard's is. So I'm going to just kind of put it at the bottom of neutral. I'm not really jiving with it, but I can see some potential there. Next is probably one of the most popular ships, I will say. Like, as far as I think the most popular ships, like I actually checked on Twitter, and this was definitely in the top 5, I want to say. At the very least, it's one of the highest. It's one of the most common. And it's interesting because, especially if you're looking at it through the lens of my theory videos, this is one of the squickest squicks that you've ever squicked. Like, this is like, oof, like bottom of the F tier. If this is like Asriel's reincarnation, and then Kris is also possessed by Asriel. It's like it's like incest, but also self-cest, and it's just weird. It's just many layers of like bizarre and not comfortable. But outside the realm of my theories, we don't really know anything about what Ralsei is. And as a result, their dynamic can mean different things. And, it's not like Kris is biologically related to Asriel. So you could argue that it's more of a best friends to lovers dynamic, kind of similar to Kris and Noelle, which is a ship we'll get to in a little bit. So if you look at it that way, it's a little less squick. But although I know some people won't agree. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about this ship. I've never been hugely on board with it, but I don't fully agree with the people who think it's full-blown disgusting bottom tier. I don't really fully agree with that. I think it's, like, Ralsei's not Asriel. Like, I'm pretty confident in that. He's his own person. And, while there's some meme potential there about dating someone who looks just like your brother, when push comes to shove, it's interesting. I think it's neutral for me. I'm not entirely sure where I put it. I think it's... is it better than Jockington in Ralsei? I mean, at least there's grounds for it. I'm going to leave it, like, right here. Like, I think it has more grounds than something like this, but I feel more squicky about it than I do for anything above it. Whereas everything below this is nonsense, and everything above this is boring. But this is, like, a little squickier than these and a little bit more interesting than these. So I'm going to put it right here. Like, it's not my cup of tea, but I don't hate it the way some people hate it. So I'm just kind of neutral on that one. It's a little weird. Next, we have Kris and Catty. Definitely a bleh. It's definitely a bleh. I'll figure out where in a second. But yeah, I don't like Catty very much. I think putting the quiet, dark, potentially slightly unhinged kid with the untalkative, somewhat unhinged occult goth girl is a little too boring. Like, if putting generic Asriel with, like, generic Des is boring, then this is just that, but wasting better characters. Better fleshed out characters, and then wasting them. So, I definitely dislike that. I think it's definitely on the level of Asgore and Toriel, and that I think it's bad for the characters, and is kind of... It's not as bad, because, like, these two getting back together would actually damage Asgore's character, whereas these two being together would just be kind of like, ugh. Like, I dislike it, but it wouldn't be, like, actually detrimental to the story the way this would. So, I'm going to put it right here. It's probably one of my most disliked so far. Next is Kris and Berdly. Oh my god. So this was, I actually asked people on Twitter for ship recommendations for this tier list. And Kris and Berdly just barely got more recommendations than any other ship. Even more than Susie and Noelle. This is the #1 ship just barely in terms of popularity on my Twitter. So, what are my feelings on it? I think it's... It's a meme. Here's the thing. It's a meme. And while there's some grounds for it, they do have a history together. They're both gamers. Or possibly gamers, if you want to if you want to continue the meme from my last video. But on the other hand, it's also just kind of a meme because, like, Kris gets Berdly killed in the Snowgrave route. So, you know, I'm not entirely certain if that is good for their relationship. Although you could also very validly argue that it's not Kris's choice that we kill Berdly in the Snowgrave route. And if you look at it that way, if this were to be canon, that would make Snowgrave that much more horrifying. Which kind of... that by itself, the fact that this being canon would make Snowgrave even more painful, kind of makes me like the ship more. Not because I actually necessarily love the dynamic, but because I think it would be really tragic. And that's kind of fun. So I'm definitely putting it above this meme. I kind of like it more than that. Can I put it above Alphys and Undyne? I think it would actually enrich the story to have that more than this. Yeah. I'm putting it at the top of decent. I think that the drama potential is too good to pass up. Like, some of these may make more sense as relationships than Kris and Berdly, but I think the contribution they provide to the story is significantly less than the drama that Snowgrave brings. So, yeah, I'm going to put it at the top of a decent. I think it's kind of... I mean, it's hilarious that I'm putting it this high, but yeah, I think it would add some good content. Next, speaking of Snowgrave, is Kris and Noelle. Oh boy. Okay, so there's two different... This is easily the ship that I see, like, the second most fan art for on my Twitter. I follow legions of Deltarune fan artists on Twitter, and the #1 ship I see is Susie and Noelle. But the #2 ship I see is Kris and Noelle. People kind of fell in love with their dynamic in the Snowgrave route. And I get it. I kind of get it. There's also people who think enjoying the toxicity of that kind of route is, like, messed up, and this is like an F tier relationship to romanticize. But you really have to look at it in both non-Snowgrave and Snowgrave versions. So in the non-Snowgrave version, you have this sweet, nice, caring girl basically befriending the weird kid, the slightly unhinged, silent kid, but, like, being their only friend. And so they're, like, kind of opposites in that regard. And that Noelle's kind of a bit more of a social butterfly. She's kind, she's open. And while she has her anxiety, her social anxiety, she's not afraid to like at the start of chapter 2, like she's volunteers to read from the book. So it's like she's not afraid. She's not like anxious of social interactions in general. So whereas Kris just avoids talking to people. So like they're opposites in many ways, but also get along well in many ways. And a lot of the blogs from the Spamton ARG really help kind of iron out their very curious friendship. So like the wholesome version of this relationship is kind of cute. Like I'd say the wholesome version of this relationship is probably like somewhere in the high decent tier. Like probably above Berdly and Kris. But the Snowgrave version, where Kris is evil and is slowly corrupting Noelle into also being their evil partner, is so freaking engaging. Like, I get it, it's sick, it's twisted, it's villainous, but it's so good, it's so fun, it's really entertaining. And this is one thing that you really have to emphasize when talking about this sort of thing, is like, you can enjoy something in fiction without endorsing it in real life. Like, this whole relationship in Snowgrave is messed up. It's not something you should ever want to see in real life. But it's super fun to watch in fiction. It's probably my favorite dynamic in Deltarune, is the Kris and Noelle in Snowgrave dynamic. It's so much fun. It is the darkest and most like twisted of relationships, and I love it. So high decent I'm gonna put it in great for now, and then if nothing else ends up in OTP, this is going in OTP. So for now, we'll just put it in great, and we'll see how things develop. Next is the Fun Gang. This is just the polyamorous relationship between Susie, Ralsei, and Kris. Ironically, this is probably more popular than just plain old Kris and Ralsei, or Kris and Susie, or Susie and Ralsei. Is this dynamic, just the relationship between these three? Generally speaking, I don't find polyamorous relationships as engaging in fiction as regular, I don't know what you'd call it, two people relationships, duologies, monogamous, that's what it's called. But that's also because you don't see it very often, so I guess I just don't have much opinion on it. I feel like it kind of muddles things and makes things more complicated, but also has the potential to make things more interesting. But generally, though, I find it kind of muddies the waters and makes things more simple and dull, rather than make things more interesting, in fiction specifically. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love with this dynamic. Like, if this became canon, would I be happy about it? No, I don't think I would be. I think it'd be kind of like, it's kind of weird. It's kind of, I mean, not weird per se, but I wouldn't be into it. I'd find it kind of weird. I'd find it kind of distracting. So, I'll put it at the top of bleh. It's not as nonsensical or squick or distasteful as some of these others, but I don't think I like that idea. Then there's a better version, which is swap out Ralsei for Noelle. And this is just the best of both worlds of Noelle and Kris, as well as Noelle and Susie, as well as technically Susie and Kris. And what's ironic is that the relationships between these three characters are definitely the focal point of most of the shipping in the show. Not the show, in the fan base. Aside from, your occasional meme relationships, or, this one. Oops. Get over there. So, would I actually like this polyamorous thing? It's kind of cute. I guess it's okay. I don't feel super strongly on it, but I love all three of these characters so much, and I enjoy Kris and Noelle so much, as well as Kris and Susie so much, as well as Noelle and Susie. So I'm just gonna... Oof. Where do I want to put this? It's a little awkward. Because on the one hand, I don't know, it'd be kind of interesting. Like I said, you don't see polyamorous relationships in fiction very often. So if it were to happen, it would be kind of interesting. Yeah, I think I'll put it like right there. I don't think it's quite as interesting as the drama of this, but it's interesting enough that I'd be kind of curious to see it how it would be handled. And I like the characters enough. So yeah, I'll put that there for now. Next is Kris and Susie. Oh my god. Like, it's at least great. It's at least in the great tier. I love, like, to be blunt, the heart of Deltarune is Kris and Susie's relationship. Like, it is their evolving dynamic from enemies. It's ironic because, like, if they were to get into a relationship, this would literally be enemies to lovers, the trope. And while that trope is typically kind of trash, in my opinion, it's typically handled really poorly. I think it would actually work kind of well here because, yeah, Susie bullied Kris, but she's a kid. So it's like, it's understandable that she would behave immaturely and then they would get over their differences. And I think there's such different, like, there's so much effort poured into the writing of their relationship and of their dynamic that it's not a far stretch to want to see it turn romantic. And it's kind of the Sora Riku thing where it's like so much effort is poured into their dynamic in general that it's not that you kind of want to see it turn romantic just to see it as the next part, the next evolution of their already complex and interesting relationship. So yeah, I quite like Kris and Susie. The difference is, do I like it more than Kris and Noelle? I think I do, technically. I like it more than normal, like vanilla Kris and Noelle. I don't think I like it as much as Snowgrave Kris and Noelle, but this is like the average of those two. So this is more consistently interesting than this dynamic. So yeah, I'll put this in great for now. Again, if nothing else ends up in OTP, these two are strong contenders for being OTPs. So yeah, this is the best one so far, on average so far. Next is Lancer and Noelle. I'm just gonna throw that in the bottom of bleh. Like, I think that's like it's not outright upsetting the way this is, but I don't really like shipping Lancer with anyone because Lancer's kind of like I get these characters are like teenagers. It's like they want to be dating. There's huge romantic subplots already brewing between the different characters. But with Lancer, he's like a little kid. He's like the little brother. And shipping him is like shipping an 8-year-old. And I mean, obviously, and I'm not like discriminating against people who want to ship Lancer if that's your thing. It's a fictional character, do what you want. But I don't really, I can only see him as a kid. What's funny is some people view him as being like this 40-year-old man. So, I guess it depends on your, flavor of wacky that you want to go with. But yeah, I'm not much of a Lancer shipper. And especially not with Noelle. It's like they don't interact, I think, at all. Yeah, I don't think they've ever interacted. So I'm going to leave him right there. Yeah, that's a weird one. Then there's Lancer and Ralsei. This one makes a little more sense. They've interacted, and they both like each other. So, like, at least there's something wholesome there. Do I want them to date? The thing is, what made it weird with this is because I know Noelle's a teenager, whereas we don't really have a pinpoint on how old Darkners are. He just sort of feels young. But with Ralsei, it's like they're both Darkners. So it's not as weird. So I'm going to move this into neutral. I don't think I feel as negative towards it as I do with the other one. Do I want it any higher than this? Yeah, it's like right around there. It's more interesting than Sans and Jevil just because I don't really see how they work. But it's kind of like, I don't actually like this ship. I think it's kind of whatever. I like their dynamic. I don't think it goes any higher than that, though. I don't, as far as like a romance goes. I mean, I guess it goes above the Addisons. And but this actually has like historical precedent because of Spamton's complex relationship and history with the Addisons. So I think it goes above Jevil, or whatever his name is, Lancer and Ralsei. So yeah, this can go right here. I'm pretty neutral on it, but it's not as awkward as this one. And this one, yeah, this is another bleh. Actually, I think it goes down into stomach pain. It might be the worst ship yet. Because they're like siblings. So, yeah, I don't really like that dynamic being... Like, I wouldn't like this becoming romantic. That's probably my least favorite one yet. This one, at least, I'd find entertaining to watch unfold. This one is just weird. Like, I wouldn't like that very much. It's just like a worse version of this. So, yeah, not a fan. Next is a weirder one. It's Mettaton and Rouxls Kaard. Huh. Well, on the one hand, we would be dealing with the DELTARUNE version of Mettaton, who's probably still just a ghost. I just used Mettaton from Undertale because we don't have a sprite for Mettaton from DELTARUNE yet. They're just known as nobody in DELTARUNE thus far. So, I mean, they're both extravagant characters. They're also both very self-centered. Rouxls would be the kind of person to try and work for someone like Mettaton, like the Undertale version of Mettaton. Maybe. I don't know. That's a weirder one. Like, I can see the potential. There might be something there. But it's kind of just like a slightly more interesting version of Sans and Jevil. It's like, take an interesting Undertale character and throw them at an interesting Darkener and then see if it's interesting. And it's like, I can kind of see a little more potential with this, but not much. Yeah, I'm going to leave it right there. I'm kind of neutral on that. Next is Mike and Spamton. The fact that this is even being discussed is wacky. We don't even have a sprite for Mike yet. Like, I had to use a television and a smile just because we had nothing else to go with. We know nothing about Mike. This is like... Where's Gaster? Yeah, this is the Gaster and Asgore equivalent. Like, they have... yeah, it's literally the... Yeah, I'm just going to put it slightly above Asgore and Gaster, because Asgore and Gaster only made more sense in Undertale, but it wasn't even that good in Undertale. At least here, this actually kind of has some background in Deltarune, but, like, there's nothing to go off of. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it here, because there's nothing to go off of. We don't know who Mike is as a character yet. Next up is Berdly and Noelle. Huh. This one's a little awkward, because they're friends, but both of them have gone out of their way to explicitly state that neither of them are interested in each other. So, it's like, and they both have better ships than each other. Yeah, I'm kind of against this. This is less like, ooh, I feel weird thinking about it, and more like it's an opportunity cost kind of thing, where it's like, if these two are dating, that means they're not dating other people, and that means that there's a lot of cool stuff that's being lost up here, as you can see. So, yeah, this one's kind of a low tier. Is it below this? I'll just leave it at the top of bleh. It's like, it's not as awkward as this, and it's not as nonsensical or squick or whatever as these. It's just sort of like, whatever. Like, it could happen, but I wouldn't like it if it happened, but I don't feel, it wouldn't be unreasonable for them to date. It just wouldn't be very interesting. So yeah, Berdly and Noelle can go at the top of bleh. Next is Rouxls Kaard and Jevil. Huh. They have no interactions whatsoever. It's kind of just another Mettaton situation where it's like, yeah, I guess if you want to throw that sort of thing at, you just throw a random character, a random antagonist at Rouxls and ship them together. It's like, yeah, I guess you could find that entertaining, but what's there to even say? It's better than Sans and Jevil. Is it better than this? No, it's not. I'm just gonna leave this here. I don't really like it. I don't feel strongly in one way or another. Another neutral. Oh, here's another one. This one is Noelle and Catty. I don't like Catty very much, but she does canonically care about Noelle. And what's funny is that Catty's not that far off from being the kind of person Noelle would like. But clearly she's a little outside her interest zone. So, again, it's kind of like the Berdly thing where it's like, I'd say this is more valid than for Berdly. Like, I think it gets into neutral tier because of that. But the opportunity cost is kind of grim. Yeah, I don't really like that relationship that much, just because there's so many better relationships for Noelle in terms of being interesting to watch. So, yeah, I'll put it at the bottom of neutral for now. It's like, yeah, it's like with Asriel and Des, I can't see any better relationships for them. But with Noelle and Catty, I can, and this is wasting them. Whereas this is just kind of boring. Like, this relationship wouldn't be the worst in the world, but it would definitely be a lot worse than any of these other ones. So, yeah, I'm going to put it right there. Next is the orange and yellow Addison. Where's the other Addison pair? This can go right there. I'm going to put it below this one because these are slightly different colors, whereas these are too similar as colors. So, yeah, that's the extent of my caring about Addison ships. Next is Papyrus and Rouxls Kaard. I mean, they both love puzzles. I guess that's their dynamic. Technically, we don't know Papyrus exists yet. Like, Papyrus is known as Sans' brother in this game. So, I guess there's grounds for a relationship. So I guess I'll put it... And it's better than something like this, in which it's explicitly, like, you know, kind of weird because one of them's a kid. Like, Papyrus is more close to being, like, a teenager or even a young adult. I guess I like it more than that. Do I like it more than this? Probably not. Yeah, I'm going to leave it right about here. It's near the top end of neutral. It's like I don't really feel anything for it, but there are definitely worse options, as you can see. So yeah, it's a little weird. It's interesting to see Papyrus in this list. Next is Rouxls Kaard and Queen. I mean, I think it's more funny to watch Rouxls Kaard flail about trying to impress the Queen than it is to actually imagine them getting together. If they did get together, I'd be kind of like neutral or negative about it. Yeah, there's better ships for Queen, and Rouxls is generally... Like, there might be a ship for Rouxls that I like. It's not this one. I'm gonna... Yeah, this is kind of an opportunity cost situation where it's like, it's not the worst ship ever. I would say it's better than this, but I wouldn't say it's much better. Yeah, top of bleh. This one's interesting. It's Toriel and Queen. And this one's kind of interesting because they're complete opposites. Like, one of them devotes her life, but they're opposites in certain ways, but also very similar in certain ways. Like, on the one hand, Toriel's like this ancient figure. She's like this queen of legend, like someone from Babylon or something, like someone from Gilgamesh. Like, she's a legendary figure who's also just like a kind, sweet mother figure. And then you have this extremely modern mother figure in the form of Queen, who's a robot. It's like, Toriel probably doesn't know how to use email, whereas Queen is email, in a way. They're both queens. They're both, like technically, you know, this is the DELTARUNE timeline, but, you know, it doesn't really change. It doesn't change Toriel's personality at all. So, And what's interesting, though, is like you might think, oh, well, Toriel is kind and actually is good to her kids, whereas Queen is abusive and bad to the kids. But I actually think they're more similar in their child rearing than you might think. Obviously, Toriel's a little nicer than Queen, but like Toriel still attacks you in Undertale if you try to leave the ruins for your own good. And Queen does the same thing. She's attacking you, but she's not trying to kill you. She's doing it for your own good, to help you get a better, happier tomorrow. So they're actually a lot more similar than you might think. I kind of like it. I feel like this is like there's other, like it's not quite as, it's very similar to this, where it's like, let's pair Toriel with another mother figure. I think it's more interesting. Like, I don't feel as warm and cuddly as I do with this one, but this is a lot more interesting of a dynamic. I think I'll leave it right here for now, just because I'm not entirely sold on it, but it's interesting. Like, if this started to happen, I wouldn't be opposed. I think it'd be an interesting exploration of Toriel's character and Queen's character. It's ironic because like Asgore and King are also in this tier, where it's like it's an interesting idea because they're kind of like slightly flanderized versions of their counterparts. Interesting. I just think it works better for Queen and Toriel than it does for Asgore and King. Mostly because Queen's a more developed character than King. But anyway, next, Ralsei and Noelle. This one's funny because Noelle doesn't have a single line of dialogue with Ralsei. Like, she completely ignores him, and when she drinks Ralsei tea, it says that there's nothing in her cup. So it's like they're explicitly making it to where there's no relationship or connection between them at all. So does that make their relationship good, or does it make it bad, or does it make it neutral? I think it makes it neutral. I think there's very intentionally no relationship here. And as a result, I think that ends up like right here, where it's not as completely nonsensical as that, but it doesn't have as much groundwork as this. So yeah, it's a neutral. It's right there. I feel nothing. But like it's artificially engineered to mean nothing. And it makes me wonder, it makes me think again about why Noelle's cup had nothing in it when she drinks Ralsei's tea. I don't know. Yeah, this is a mystery. The Ralsei tea thing with Noelle is very interesting, but I don't quite understand it yet. I'll get back to it in a later theory. Next is Ralsei and Berdly, who I think Berdly has one line of dialogue addressing Ralsei as a minion. So at least he talks to Ralsei. Yeah, I'm just going to put it slightly above Noelle and Ralsei. I don't have any feelings on it at all. Then there's Ralsei and Susie. Now, this dynamic is a lot more fleshed out, and I can actually see why some people ship it. Because it's just sort of like they're complete opposites, and it's an opposites attract sort of situation, much like Task Manager and Jevil. But there's like more validity in its existence than them. It definitely makes more sense than that. Makes a little more sense than that. I think this is about where it goes. It's a decent ship. I think there's some potential there for some interesting dynamics. I've definitely seen some very cute fan art of Ralsei and Susie, but I don't think there's much, like, I definitely think there's better. I think they're better as friends than anything. I don't think the romantic angle is entirely something I'm interested in. But, you know, clearly I think higher of it than the polyamorous version, considering every version of that got higher than the poly version. But I digress. Next is the Royal Guards, who are hilariously still wearing helmets and are still referred to as RG, as in Royal Guards, in the code of Deltarune, even though this is a different reality where they're presumably not guards anymore. But I digress. I feel nothing about this pair. This is the most, like, here's representation for the sake of representation rather than giving them characters or making them interesting. Like, they don't even have faces. They don't even have names. Like, at least with Undyne and Alphys and Undertale, they had names and arcs and characters and depths and personalities outside of them being lesbian, or bisexual in Alphys's case. But, like, the Royal Guards have nothing. They're nothing. They're just, one of them doesn't talk and one of them's a dude bro. And then they're in a relationship. And it's so boring. I have nothing to say about them. Yeah, I don't care. I'll put it at the bottom of neutral just because I don't care. Like, them existing does not enhance my enjoyment of Undertale or Deltarune at all. So, yeah. Whatever. Next is Rouxls Kaard and that one Rudinn who has a crush on him. I mean, I guess there's some precedent there. I guess it gets above the other Rouxls ships thus far. Does it get above this Rouxls ship with Papyrus? Yeah. I don't know if like, Papyrus is kind of like Lancer, where it's like, I don't really like the idea of shipping him. So, yeah, I'm neutral towards this ship, but I think it's a bit better than most of these other neutral ships. So, yeah. High neutral. Next is Sans and Alphys. And this is a dynamic that in Undertale I could almost see, but even in Undertale I think they're just friends. I don't think there's anything romantic going on. And I think they're just like good friends, and that's it. And in Deltarune, they have even less connections with one another. So, yeah. Yeah, I think it's just not there. Like, I just don't think it's happening. And if it were to happen, I'm not sure it would actually enhance the game or the story. Yeah, it's definitely an opportunity cost thing, where Sans dating someone else and Alphys dating someone else would definitely be better. I'll put them above Berdly and Noelle because I care more about Berdly and Noelle, and thus I want to see them date more interesting people, whereas I don't care as much about Deltarune Sans and Deltarune Alphys. And thus I don't, like, there's not as much being lost by them dating each other as there is by these two dating each other. So yeah, I'll put it right there. Sweet cap and cakes. Stomach pain. I don't give a I don't care about the sweet cap and cakes. I actually find them kind of annoying. I don't dislike them being in a relationship, but, like, they're even lower than the Royal Guards in neutral because I just don't care about them. Like, they're like the Royal Guards of Deltarune, except I find them annoying. It's not that I find them annoying, I guess I should clarify. It's just that there's so much effort and screen time given to these guys, and they're such one-dimensional characters, and I just don't find them interesting at all. They're very boring. Alright, next, Sham and Jevil. This one's pretty decent. This one's pretty good, because they were already good friends prior to, or maybe not good friends, but the closest thing either of them had to a real friend. And if they were actually a thing, if they were actually a couple, that would make Sham having to lock up Jevil a lot more interesting and dramatic and tragic. Kind of like how Berdly and Kris being into a couple would actually make the Snowgrave route more impactful. So yeah, I'd actually put that, like, right here. I think that they're very comparable to each other. I think the potential with this is better because they're both main characters, whereas these are kind of like lesser characters in terms of importance in the plot. But it would still add to the story. It'd make it more dramatic. So yeah, I'll put Sham and Jevil right about there. Next is Sans and Toriel. Now, you see, this is such a perfect relationship for so many reasons, because they're both worldly people. They're both, like, very down-to-earth, pretty nice people in general who just sort of want to live their best lives. And the reason that Sans works in a relationship with Toriel, whereas Asgore ultimately doesn't, is that when terrible things happens to Sans, he's just it makes him sad, but he doesn't act on his emotions. He always, like, and this is shown in Undertale, because no matter how evil you make Frisk act, Sans never kills them. Even whenever you kill his brother, Sans does not act, even if that upsets him greatly, because his emotions don't get control of him. Whereas Asgore would absolutely act. And he would act evilly at that. So, whereas Sans has much more emotional maturity, I guess you could say. And he's a bit of a comedian, which brings some much needed levity to Toriel's rather serious and somewhat dour life. Like, she's the perfect audience for him. Yeah, this is kind of OTP. Like, this is kind of just perfect. Like, they're kind of made for each other, I'm gonna be honest. Yeah. And there's something kind of poetic about this dynamic in a Undertale perspective, because if you think about it, in at least one of the routes, Toriel is the first boss you fight, and Sans is the last boss you fight. So, you know, it's kind of like the inverse of the Asgore. Like, in the neutral route and the pacifist route, or, well, not in the pacifist route. Actually, not even in neutral route, because you fight Flowey. So yeah, no, like, it's only in the genocide route where you start with Toriel and end with Sans, which is just sort of poetic. So yeah, this is kind of just perfect. Like, I love, like, there's nothing for me to dislike about Sans and Toriel. I think it's a really cute relationship that works well, and there's no reason not to do it. It just objectively makes their characters and their story better. So, yeah, I like it. I'm going to put it in OTP. I think it's just perfect. Like, I have no complaints. Like, with these other relationships, there's, like, some problems or shortcomings or issues or things that make me go, yeah, I don't really know what to say. I don't know if I care enough. Whereas this is just, I love it. Like, every time there's a scene with Toriel and Sans, I like it. It makes me happy. It gets high tier. And it just makes sense for their characters. It's just well written. So, yeah. Next is another Toriel ship, but definitely a weirder one. This one's King and Toriel. What's funny is that if Toriel ended up with King, it would just be Asgore all over again, but worse. Which is why this relationship would never happen. I could almost... Yeah. Unfortunately, while I'd like to imagine this might be interesting, I think it would just be like it would be a more shallow version of her relationship with Asgore. Because at least with Asgore, there's enough of a good man that you could see her falling in love with him and then marrying him before realizing his shortcomings. But with King, he's so flawed in general that she would just avoid him. So, like, there's not even that much potential for the relationship. So, yeah, it's just illogical. I don't dislike it to the same extent I do some of these others, but it would never happen. So, yeah. Interesting, though. I do find this kind of interesting to think about. Like, if they were, like, trapped... Like, you know, there's that one scene in Avatar where Zuko and Katara get trapped in a room together and they just have to talk to each other? And it's like, that's, like, a really interesting scene. It's like, I would love to see a scene where these two are forced to just sit in a room and talk to each other. I think that could be very interesting. But just on its own, I don't think this relationship makes much sense. Next is Spamton and Queen. I don't know how to feel about this one. I don't feel much of anything, actually. There's certainly overlap in their characters, but their complete refusal to talk about each other almost at all, even in routes where you think they'd talk about each other, like the Snowgrave route, where Spamton literally takes over her castle, she has nothing to say about Spamton. And Spamton's only line, I think the only time I've seen Spamton talk about Queen is in the Spamton sweepstakes, where he talks about how he wants to be the new ruler of the Cyber City. And he's like, he wants to overthrow her. But it's like, that's the extent of their relationship history. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel anything. Like, there's potential there, but it's just sort of a non-existent relationship right now. So, Yeah, I guess I'll put it like right here. Yeah, I guess I'll put it right there. It's like, it's not, I just feel so little. I feel nothing. It's just right in the smack dab of neutral. Here's a popular ship. This is one of the most popular ships on my Twitter. It's Jevil and Spamton. They do have big divorced energy, I must say. Does it get them above decent tier? Well, if you've seen my Spamton character analysis video, you'll know that I kind of view these characters as being intrinsically opposed. And I think that kind of inhibits my ability to enjoy their ship. It's not a bad ship, and I kind of like it. But I don't know if I like it any more than any of these other decent ships. Like, it's not as funny as this. And it's not really as supported by, like, there's not as much character potential as, like, some of these others. I don't know. Like, some people like it. I know they do. But from my point of view and my viewing of Spamton as a character and my viewing of Jevil as a character, it just doesn't make much sense. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of decent. I like it. It's fine. It's just not quite something I see happening. Oh, and here is the, like, if you ignore the Berdly and Kris, like, some people listing almost as a meme, Noelle and Susie is easily the most popular ship in the fan base. Mostly because it's kind of canon. Namely, I'm not convinced it's canon in the sense that Susie has a crush on Noelle. I think people are giving Susie way too much social credit. Susie completely misunderstands the romantic intentions of Noelle and Berdly throughout the chapter, so I don't think it's... I think Susie likes Noelle as a friend. I think Susie's never had a friend before, and I think she's desperately lonely and wants to have any connections with people, much less romantic ones. So I think it's still up in the air how this relationship will end up. I often meme on my Twitter followers by talking about how great it's going to be when Susie turns down Noelle in order for Toby Fox to teach us a lesson about, like, how much rejection LGBT people face in the pursuit of romance. So, you know, I love to bring that up just to make my Twitter followers feel bad because I'm a bad person. But I have to admit, it is pretty great. Like, even if, I guess, do I want to see this be canon more than I want to see Susie turn Noelle down? That's the real question. The canon relationship of Susie and Noelle is cute. And it probably deserves to at least be above this meme. But I don't love it the same way I do these other ships. So I'm going to put it at the top of decent. I think I'd be more happy seeing Noelle get turned down than I would see her get a happy relationship with Susie. Again, I'm kind of a bad person. But, you know, that's my 2 cents. Next is just a vastly worse version of this in that it's Susie, Noelle, and Catty. It doesn't deserve F tier. Like with these, it could only end horribly. And then this one is just really uncomfortable. Whereas this one, I just dislike Catty. So it probably deserves to be right about here. But it goes here. It goes below Kris and Catty because this is wasting 2 characters' potential. Or no, it's not that it's wasting their potential. It's ruining 2 characters' relationship. I don't like Catty. Catty can stay right there. Goodbye. Next, we have Susie and Monster Kid. Why? Monster Kid's only dialogue is to talk about how Susie sucks. Like, in terms of his discussion of Susie. I don't like Monster Kid. I thought Monster Kid worked okay. I was like neutral towards him as a character in Undertale because he was just this innocent kid. He was a good plot device as a character, and that's why his name is Monster Kid and not a person. He's not an actual character. He's a plot device to be like to basically give you a backboard to or whatever to bounce off of during the midway point of the game. Like if you're playing pacifist, he is, he reacts accordingly. If you're genocide, he reacts accordingly. Like he's just there to add a wrinkle to your interactions with Undyne. He's not a character. And then in Deltarune, he's just kind of a jerk. Like he's like a less jerky version of Snowy, but he's still just like the most generic teen boy character in the entire game. Yeah, this goes straight to the bottom. Does it though? Yeah, screw it. I'm gonna be biased. I hate this ship. I don't think Monster Kid deserves Susie, and I think Susie has infinitely better romantic options. Yeah. Like, is it really as bad as stuff like this? At least with these, there's something, like, I can say something positive. I can say nothing positive about this ship. Bleh. Stomach pain. Goodbye. S tier. Why does this get S tier? Why does this get OTP tier? Why, it's quite simple, my dear viewers. Because I need something to put in the thumbnail. Next is Swatch and Task Manager. This one's decent. Like they have that kind of like that almost James Bond professionalism kind of vibe going on. James Bond and a femme fatale, just sort of like, but like less of a femme fatale and more of a two secret agent co-workers who also have a relationship on the side. Like, yeah, like this one's just fun. Like, I just kind of like it. It's like very similar to Bratty and Catty in that it's just a fun little thing that exists. Yeah, I don't think it gets any higher than that. I think it probably goes above Bratty and Catty because I like both of these characters more than I like Bratty or Catty. But yeah, it's just a decent, fun little ship. Not much to say on that one. Swatch and Rouxls Kaard. Didn't Swatch beat the crap out of Rouxls Kaard and then throw him out of his diner? Yeah, not in love with this. Yeah, no. It's just sort of nonsensical. Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes right about here. I think it's... No, it's worse. Because at least with this one, it's like you can kind of see why there'd be like a precedent for them to be in a relationship. This one makes even less sense. Yeah, this is like a low blech or mid blech tier ship. I think it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't have as much precedence on the Spade King and Rouxls Kaard. Next is it's another polyamorous one, and it's Rouxls, Swatch, and Spamton. I feel like someone hit the roulette and just got 3 random characters. I mean, it's not quite the same. Like Swatch and Spamton have history. Is Swatch and Spamton on this list? I don't think it is. Swatch and Spamton absolutely should have been on this list. Did I forget to put it on here? Okay, yeah, it looks like I accidentally forgot to add the Swatch and Spamton ship to this tier list. I'm going to go back in and add Swatch and Spamton after this video for the sake of allowing other people to ship Swatch and Spamton. For now, I'll go ahead and say that this trio is random and a little weird, and Rouxls card doesn't really have any place being there. So I'm going to put it like the top of bleh. Yeah. It's better than these because these are like wasting potential, whereas none of these characters are super hot shipping material, at least in my book. So it's like it's not a huge waste to have them shipped together. Then there's Sham and Swatch. Sham and Swatch. I mean, I guess they both have shops. I mean, it's super random. Like this is another like I like it more than Jockington and Ralsei. But there's just nothing there. Like, yeah, it's on the same level as Spamton and Queen, where it's like, I guess I can kind of see where you're coming from. There's some overlap, but there's no precedent for it. And it's just like, I don't have enough of an idea of their characters to really identify with that relationship. So, yeah, it just goes right here. It's fine. Not much to say on that front. Then there is Task Manager and Queen, which is probably the best Queen ship, if I'm being honest. Like, maybe OTP? Is it OTP? Task Manager is not enough of a character for it to be OTP. And it's definitely not on high level as these characters. But it's definitely great tier. Like, the Queen and her head maid, like, that's just, like, that's designed to be shipping material. So, yeah, that's just great. Like, that just works. I think this is probably the best dynamic, like, that I've seen, or, like, that I could even remotely imagining with Queen and anyone else, and same with Task Manager. Both tall women. Yeah, this goes in great. And then that's it. That's all 60 ships. Do I want to make any changes? Do I want to bump anyone up to OTP? I think I'm pretty much good. Yeah, I think I'll leave these where they are. Yeah, I think these are our crowning kings and queens of ships. These are the top 5, top 6, 7, etc. 60 total ships ranked and tier listed, all Deltarune related. That's pretty great. In terms of where I'd put Swatch and Spamton, I'm going to add that later, but I'm going to say that the video is over. We've ended the video. So that way I can still just put 60 ships ranked in the thumbnail and in the title of the video. Yeah, video is over. I'm done ranking. But if Spamton and Swatch were here as a ship, it would probably go in like decent tier, where like probably like in between. Yeah, I'd probably put it like just above Spamton and Jevil. In that it's another relationship where it's like, it doesn't really make sense for them to be dating because they're kind of enemies. But there is enough of a history. They have a history that wasn't always purely antagonistic, so I could see something there. And there is almost a dynamic. I mean, Spamton literally dresses like Swatch. Like, I see the appeal. So yeah, just like insert Spamton and on Swatch's shoulder right there. Kapow. Boom. You're welcome. And with that, that's the video. What are your favorite? What are your favorite Deltarune ships? What are your least favorite? Do you agree with my tier list, or do you think I have terrible taste? Let me know in the comments down below. Yeah, this is a silly little video, but I enjoyed making it. I'm going to try and make a couple more similar videos at some point, maybe in December, but like a little more silly, a little more serious than a shipping tier list, but instead, kind of discussing the characters and what makes them interesting. I'm thinking about doing a tier list where I rank all of the tropes that Deltarune uses and ranking them based off of how well Deltarune employs those tropes and how well it innovates upon them. And I think that would be both interesting in terms of being a lesson on the different ways you can use a trope and it'll be interesting from a writer's perspective. So it'll be a more interesting and a more serious sort of tier list video than ranking non-canon ships and crack ships and nonsense. So I hope you're looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was just a quick thing that I thought I'd pump out, keep y'all fed while I work on my other bigger projects. Hopefully you'll get another video on Deltarune from me before November is out, but only time will tell. Without further ado, I believe that's everything I have to say for today. I'll go ahead and insert my Patreon thanks here. Hey guys, it's your boy Jaru here, and today I'm going to make sure I don't sound depressed while reading off the patron thanks, because it's really impolite to sound sad when thanking people for giving you money. A special thanks go out to E-Roll, Lil Nyrus X, Hannah Brown, Mold Brain, and Suit Number 1. And a very special thanks go out to Captain APAC, who continues to support me at the Spamton tier. I cannot express how much all of y'all's support means to me and my family during these difficult times. There are literally days when I would not have money for food or electricity if it weren't for your support. So when I say it makes a difference, I'm not just saying that for show. I hope I can continue to make content worthy of your support, and I hope it's clear that no matter how much you're donating, it really, really is a blessing. Thank you very much. And with the patrons now thanked, we can wrap this baby up. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you've got something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.